Do you ever wake up in the morning and before you even open your eyes, before you even move your legs beneath the blankets, you feel this massive crushing weight sitting right on the center of your chest? You haven't even looked at your phone yet. You haven't seen the news. You haven't checked your bank account. The room is perfectly quiet. The sunlight is just starting to bleed through the edges of the blinds. But your body already knows. Your nervous system is already braced for impact. It feels like you're waking up on a battlefield every single day, and you're expected to just pour a cup of coffee, get in your car, and act like the sky isn't falling. It's a very specific, deeply modern kind of exhaustion. You're walking around with the quiet, terrifying conviction that everything is barely holding together. And if you let your guard down even for a second, the entire structure of your life is going to collapse. Oh, maybe you know what I mean. Maybe you've felt this too. That heavy, suffocating sense that the world is completely full of troubles and you are entirely, hopelessly alone, trying to navigate them. In a world full of noise, trust the signal. If you're hearing this, you've already found it. This is Dove and Serpent Radio. Stay with me. I'm sitting here in the studio, watching the slow, steady pulse of the transmitter tubes. It's 2:17 a.m. The city outside my window is locked in the dark, a sprawling grid of concrete and sleeping bodies. But I know that not everyone is asleep. I know that right now, in thousands of darkened rooms, there are people staring at the ceiling, feeling the exact same crushing dread that you're feeling. I don't know where you're listening from tonight. Maybe you're sitting at your kitchen table, watching the digital clock on the microwave slowly tick forward, dreading the moment the sun comes up. Maybe you're lying on the floor of your living room, letting the ambient glow of a screen wash over you, because the silence in your head is simply too loud to endure. But if you're still here, listening to a voice in the middle of the night, there's probably a reason. And you might not tell anyone this, but you're tired. You're so incredibly tired of being strong. You're tired of having to process the grief, the anger, the endless screaming panic of a world that feels like it's spinning completely out of control. I want to talk about the concept of carrying things that do not belong to you. If you talk to a marine geologist, they'll tell you about a strange phenomenon that they occasionally find on the ocean floor. They will be using remote submersibles, right, to map the deep, flat, featureless plains of the abyssal zone, thousands of feet below the surface. The ground down there is usually just soft, gray mud, built up from millions of years of microscopic sediment slowly drifting down from the surface. But every once in a while, sitting right in the middle of this endless muddy plain, they'll find a massive, jagged boulder, a rock the size of a house, made of solid granite or even quartz. It makes absolutely no geological sense. There are no mountains down there, right? There are no tectonic plates shifting to create it. It shouldn't be there. Geologists call them drop stones. Millions of years ago during the Ice Age, massive glaciers would grind across the continents, picking up these enormous boulders and locking them deep in the ice. When the glaciers reached the ocean and broke off into icebergs, they carried those stones out into the open sea. And as the iceberg slowly drifted into warmer waters, it would melt. Eventually the ice would give way, and the boulder would plunge into the dark, sinking for miles until it hit the bottom of the ocean, resting in a place it was never meant to be. I think about drop stones when I think about the way we consume information today. We're not biologically designed to carry the weight of the entire world. For hundreds of thousands of years, the human nervous system evolved to carry, maybe 50 or 60 people in our immediate tribe. We're designed to worry about the weather in our specific, little valley, the predators in our specific little forest, the health of our, immediate neighbors. But now we've built these massive, glowing, inescapable machines that mainline the tragedies of 8 billion people directly into our optic nerves 24 hours a day. You open your phone, and within 60 seconds, you're handed the grief of a war on the other side of the planet, the panic of a collapsing economy, the anger of a political scandal, the personal tragedy of a stranger. These are not your stones, but the algorithmic icebergs of the internet are carrying them into your life and dropping them directly into your deep water. No wonder you feel overwhelmed. No wonder you feel like you can't breathe. You're carrying 1,000 drop stones in your chest, trying to process the pain of a global village that your biology simply doesn't know how to hold. It makes you feel isolated. The news cycle is a machine fundamentally designed to make you feel helpless, because frightened, isolated people are easy to manipulate. The world wants you to believe that everyone is angry, that everyone is dangerous, and that you are completely on your own. But I'm telling you, from a quiet room in the dead of night, that's a lie. You're not alone. There is a hidden architecture of connection in the world, and it's older and stronger than the noise. In the 1980s, a biologist named Katie Payne was observing African elephants at a zoo. She spent hours just sitting near their enclosure, taking notes on their behavior. Well, one afternoon, she noticed something incredibly strange. She felt a throbbing sensation in the air. It wasn't a sound she could hear, right? We're not with her ears, but it was a distinct rhythmic vibration that she could feel in her chest, rattling the air inside her lungs. She realized that the elephants were communicating, but they were doing it at a frequency completely beneath the threshold of human hearing. She brought in specialized acoustic equipment, right? Microphones that could detect earthquakes and tectonic shifts. She discovered that elephants possess a complex vocabulary of infrasound. They produce massive, low-frequency rumbles that can travel through the ground for just miles and miles and miles. And when a storm is approaching across the dry savanna, elephants can hear the thunder from over 100 miles away, and when they do, the matriarch of the herd will press her feet into the dirt and release a deep infrasonic rumble. It travels through the earth, passing through the roots of trees, echoing across the plains, reaching other herds far over the horizon. They're checking in. They're warning each other. But most importantly, they're sending comfort. The rumble literally translates to, I am here, we are here. Even when they can't see each other, even when they're separated by vast distances and brutal landscapes, they are constantly wrapped in this invisible, vibrating web of reassurance. They know they're part of a network. I wonder if this is why you clicked on this broadcast tonight. You're exhausted from the high-frequency screaming of the modern world. You're tired of the shrill, frantic panic of the surface. You came here looking for the rumble. Now think of Dove and Serpent Radio as your infrasound. I'm sitting in this studio, pressing my hands against the console, sending a signal out into the dark. I can't see you. I don't know your name. I don't know the specific shape of the grief that you're carrying tonight, but I'm sending this frequency through the wires, through the fiber optics, through the cold night air, directly to the speakers in your room, just to tell you, I am here. And because you're listening, because your frequency resonated with this title, I know that you are here. And we are not alone. The world is full of troubles, yeah. The storms are real, the rain is cold. But the artificial part is the isolation. The idea that you have to survive this by yourself is a ghost story we've been conditioned to believe. I want to talk about a very specific, very eerie flower that grows in the deep, ancient forests of North America. It's called Monotropa uniflora. And most people know it by its folk name, the ghost pipe. Now, if you're walking through the deep woods and you happen to spot one, it looks like a hallucination. It's a small, delicate plant, but it is completely, entirely stark white. It has no green on it whatsoever. It looks like it's made of translucent wax or carved from bone. It looks like a phantom. The reason it's perfectly white is that it contains absolutely no chlorophyll. It cannot photosynthesize. It cannot absorb sunlight and turn it into energy. Now, by all the standard laws of botany, the ghost pipe should not be able to exist. It has no mechanism for feeding itself. It survives because it's plugged into a secret economy. Beneath the soil of the forest, there's a massive, unimaginably complex network of fungal threads called the mycorrhizal web, I think. Anyway, it connects the roots of almost every single tree in the forest. When a massive oak tree soars into the sky, spreads its leaves, and absorbs the blazing energy of the sun, it produces more sugar than it needs. And it willingly pumps that excess energy down into its roots, into the fungal network, distributing it to the saplings in the shade, to the sick trees, and to the ghost pipes. The ghost pipe lives its entire life in the deep shade, contributing nothing to the canopy, unable to face the sun. And yet the forest keeps it alive. The towering oaks weather the brutal storms. They take the beating of the wind. They capture the light. And they quietly, continuously feed the fragile white flower in the dark. I see people living like ghost pipes all the time. Now, maybe you're in a season of your life right now where you feel completely drained. You feel like you have no light to give. You feel like you can't face the sun, you can't produce, you can't contribute the way society demands that you contribute. You are exhausted, you're hiding in the shade, and the guilt of that exhaustion is eating you alive. You feel like a burden. Now, if that is you tonight, please listen to me carefully. You are not supposed to be an oak tree every single day of your life. There are seasons where you are the strong one. There are seasons where you weather the storm and you capture the light and you hold up the people around you. But there are also seasons where you are the ghost pipe, where you are fragile, where you need to sit in the dark and be sustained by the unseen generosity of the network. And that's okay. You don't have to earn your right to exist tonight. You don't have to optimize your trauma. You don't have to fix the broken world before you go to sleep. Allow yourself to be kept alive by the invisible connections, the friend who sent you a text you didn't have the energy to answer, the stranger who held the door for you in the rain, the late-night radio host who was sitting awake with you in the dark. We are all part of the mycelial web. We're pumping the energy down into the roots for you until you're strong enough to face the sun again. It is okay to rest. The world will keep spinning if you set the drop stones down for a few hours. Now, there's a principle in physics called sympathetic resonance. It's one of the most beautiful poetic mechanics of the natural universe. If you walk into a room that has two grand pianos sitting opposite each other, and you walk up to the first piano and you strike a single key, let's say middle C, the hammer hits the string vibrates, creating the sound. But if you look inside the second piano, the one you haven't touched, something incredible is happening. The string for middle C inside that second piano will spontaneously begin to vibrate on its own. It'll start to hum, quietly singing the exact same note back across the room. It does this because the sound waves traveling through the air are physically pushing against everything in the room. Most objects, the walls, the chairs, the other strings in the piano, are too rigid, or they're tuned to a different frequency, so they just absorb the energy and they stay quiet. But that one specific string, because it's tuned to the exact same tension, the exact same frequency, catches the invisible wave in the air. It recognizes its own nature in the vibration of the other, and it resonates. I think human beings operate entirely on sympathetic resonance. You walk through your daily life and you're bombarded by thousands of frequencies that don't match yours. The angry shouting on the television, the hollow corporate jargon at the job, the shallow small talk at the grocery store. It all washes over you. And you remain perfectly still. You remain silent. Makes you feel broken, because everyone else seems to be vibrating to the noise. And you just feel detached. But you aren't broken. You're just waiting for your note. And then, entirely by chance, you'll be reading a book written by someone who died 100 years ago, or you lock eyes with a stranger on a subway, or you will turn on a radio broadcast at 2 in the morning, and someone will say a sentence that perfectly articulates the exact secret ache in your chest, and suddenly you're vibrating, you're humming, you are resonating across the dark. And that's how you know you have a friend in this world. It isn't always about proximity. It isn't always about someone sitting in the room holding your hand. True companionship, the deep, parasocial intimacy of the human spirit, is about finding the people whose frequency makes your own strings vibrate. You might not have anyone in your physical life right now that you can tell the absolute truth to. You might be completely surrounded by people, yet profoundly lonely, because none of them are tuned to your tension. So I'll hold it for you tonight. You can set the mask down here. You can stop pretending that you have it all figured out. You can admit that you're terrified of the future, that you're exhausted by the present, and that you're mourning a past that didn't turn out the way you thought it would. I know the feeling. I sit in this chair, surrounded by the hum of the electronics and the heavy silence of the sleeping city, and some nights the dread catches up to me too. Some nights I look at the news and I feel the ice forming in my veins, but then I remember the pianos. I remember the elephants. I remember that the architecture of our connection is stronger than the architecture of our panic. Now I want to tell you a little story about a light in the dark. Off the eastern coast of Scotland, out in the freezing, violent waters of the North Sea, there is a deadly, submerged reef called the Bell Rock. For centuries, it was the terror of sailors, because the rock was completely hidden underwater except for a few hours at low tide. Ships would tear their hulls open in the middle of the night, sinking into the freezing black water, taking thousands of lives over the years. In the early 1800s, a young engineer named Robert Stevenson decided to do the impossible. He decided to build a lighthouse on a rock that was underwater for 20 hours a day. Everyone told him he was insane. The government refused to fund it. The sea was too violent. The logistics were impossible. But Stevenson was haunted by the thought of those sailors, people he had never met, drowning in the dark. He took a crew of men out to the reef. They lived on a tiny rocking boat anchored nearby. Every day, when the tide dropped and the top of the rock was exposed for a few brief hours, they would frantically row over, stand waist deep in the freezing surf, and chip away at the solid stone by hand, trying to carve a foundation. They were battered by storms. They were freezing. They were constantly in danger of being swept away. It took them 4 agonizing years to build it, block by massive granite block, fitting them together with mathematical precision so the tower could withstand the full violent force of the winter ocean. When they finally lit the lantern at the top of Bell Rock Lighthouse, the beam of light cut 20 miles into the darkness of the North Sea. Robert Stevenson and his crew didn't stay to watch the ships pass. They didn't get to meet the thousands of sailors whose lives they saved over the next 2 centuries. They just built the structure, lit the fire, and went back to the mainland. They built a mechanism of grace for strangers they would never know. I think we're all doing that in our own small, quiet ways. When the world feels full of troubles, It's easy to believe that human nature is fundamentally selfish. It's easy to look at the loudest, angriest voices and assume that is all we are. But you forget about the lighthouses. You forget about the person who paid for the coffee or the stranger behind them in line. You forget about the friend who sat with you in silence when you couldn't stop crying. You forget about your own quiet endurance. The fact that despite how much pain you're carrying, you still show up. You still try to be kind. You still try to keep your own light burning. You're building a foundation on a submerged rock in a freezing ocean, and it's incredibly hard work. And you might not ever see the ships that you're guiding to safety. You might not realize that your simple, stubborn refusal to become bitter is the exact beacon that is keeping someone else from sinking. But it is happening. The light is cutting through the dark. The room you're sitting in right now might feel like a cage. The silence might feel heavy. But I want you to imagine it differently. I want you to imagine that your room is the top of that lighthouse. You're suspended above the violent sea of the world. You are safe in the glass lantern. The storm is raging outside. The waves of the news cycle are crashing against the foundation. But they can't reach you up here. You don't have to solve the ocean's problems tonight. You can't command the wind to stop. All you have to do is sit by the glass, watch the sweeping beam of the light, and know that you're part of a very old, very stubborn human tradition of surviving the dark together. I'm so glad you clicked on this video. I'm so glad you're still awake with me. When the morning comes, the world is going to demand your attention again. The algorithm is going to try to hand you another drop stone. The noise is going to try to convince you that you're alone, and that everyone is against you, and that the sky is falling. But you and I, we know the secret now. We know about the rumble beneath the earth. We know about the sympathetic resonance waiting in the dark. You have a friend here. You have a companion in the static. So if the world feels too heavy tomorrow, don't force yourself to carry it. Set the stones down. Remember the ghost pipe. Let yourself be sustained by the hidden network for a while. If things have felt strange lately, maybe the point is not to force them to feel normal again. Maybe the point is to notice what part of you is no longer willing to pretend that they do. Keep that signal close. You've been listening to Dove and Serpent Radio. Until next time, stay strange in the silence and keep the dial somewhere between wonder and understanding.